Hello, and welcome to this second week of our second course, dedicated to the theme of how to practice in everyday life. In the first course, as I'm sure you remember, we looked at how to practice in meditation, which means how to work with our mind directly during such meditation practices as the mindfulness of the body, the mindfulness of breathing, and metta bhavana. We also looked at the importance of receptivity in meditation. So important is it that we have practices specifically for developing it. Formless meditation and just sitting. And we also looked in more detail about how to directly work with the mind in meditation, which means working with the hindrances to meditation. And of course, the first step here is simply to become aware of the underlying hindrances in our experience, and then knowing how to work with them using different approaches. And all of this happening in a context of a warm, open, even intimate relationship with oneself, with one's body and oneself. So that was the first course. Now turning our mind to practice in everyday life, what that means, how to work with the mind in everyday life, in our actions, in our words, and in our thoughts. In Buddhism, our practice in everyday life is called ethics. And we already saw what ethics is not. Specifically, ethics refers to our relationships, to our relations with ourselves, with others, with the world. It means acting more and more skillfully, not acting unskillfully. And in the first week, we saw what that means. We also saw what karma is, what karma is not, and how karma relates to ethics. We could even say that karma is ethics. And our ethical practice can help us become happier, more open. Happiness, it's said, is a clear conscience. A clear conscience. It can help us be more emotionally positive and have closer relations to others, more honest relations. And all of this has a positive effect on others as well as ourselves. What's more, Buddhism tells us ethics supports our meditation. What does this mean? The more ethical we are, the better, the deeper we'll be able to meditate. Or from another point of view, if you find meditation difficult, then let's look at our ethics. Let's improve our ethics. What's more, ethics will help us embody our meditation experience. We might not be expecting this. In meditation, after all, we start to experience ourselves in a new way, in a different way. We come into a new relationship to ourselves. And it's natural to want to express this new relationship, to embody this new relationship with others and the world. In a nutshell, it's natural to want to integrate our meditation experience with who we are in the world. And ethics guides us how. We'll see more about this later. Meditation will also help us be aware of our mental states, which is vital to the practice of Buddhism and to the practice of ethics. It's important that we see the distinction between, on the one hand, our mental states, and on the other, our actions, our words and thoughts, which are coloured by our mental states. That gives us a chance to decide to act upon certain mental states or not act upon them. Ethical choice becomes ours. And finally, ethics also helps us to face the truth, to face reality, to see truth, to see reality more clearly. By being a psychologically healthy human being, with a clear mind, an aware mind, we are more able to see the truth, to see reality. But more about this in the fourth course. So, how do we practice ethics? As we have seen, ethics doesn't mean obeying long lists of rules. Rather, there are 5 great ethical principles, and a more detailed list of 10 great ethical principles, which give expression to a more intensive practice. But in this course, we'll look at the first 5 only. Principles. These principles can be expressed as precepts, namely the 5 precepts. And each precept has a negative form and a positive form. Negatively, it's what we're trying to stop doing. Positively, what we're trying to do more of in its place. In part, we're developing our intention to stop acting a certain way, and in its place developing an intention and the ability to act in another way. These positive precepts were an addition of plenty, Sangharachita, who saw the importance of not only stopping doing something, but also doing something else in its place. Each precept is a training principle, something we try and do better and better. It's normal, it's to be expected that we sometimes fail, we sometimes make mistakes. And also, we can continue improving forever, finding more and more ways to apply practically these great principles, and practicing more and more deeply. So each principle, each precept is in fact a training principle leading to an ideal. The ideal, the great ideal being how a Buddha acts, how a Buddha spontaneously and naturally acts, the natural expression of who a Buddha is, by virtue of his attaining enlightenment. And we can move towards this ideal by acting, by choosing to act from what is best in us, by acting from what is most aware, intelligent, sympathetic, and loving. This is, of course, something we can only do if we're free to take it on ourselves. And if we do this, taking full responsibility for ourselves. But we have a guide as to how to act. And this guidance is expressed in these 5 great principles of ethics. So, now let's move on to the first precept, this first great principle. And looking at the negative form first, looking at what we're trying not to do, what we're trying to stop doing. We're looking to abstain from taking life. This gives us an excellent opportunity to say a little something about the nature of spiritual life. In my experience of people looking to practice Buddhism, there can often be an attitude that we pass quickly over the first steps, maybe thinking that a good student makes quick progress. But it's not really like that. In a spiritual life, how do you move on to the next stage? In a spiritual life, you move on to the next stage by going more and more deeply into the stage where you are at now. So if you just pass something over quickly, look to race ahead, well, you end up not doing anything at all, apart from maybe increasing your intellectual knowledge, something that insignificant. And this is never more true than the first precept. You can almost hear somebody say, well, if I haven't personally killed anybody, well, yep, I do that. What's next? But let's stay with this precept a while. The first point I'd like to make is killing also includes killing animals. It also includes causing death by paying to cause death. And we can consider what we've eaten in the last little while and what has had to happen for us to eat what we have eaten. But the precept has a more refined form as well. Not only not taking life, but not causing harm. The precept means abstaining from violence, including any form of coercion, manipulation, and exploitation. In fact, any use of power over others against their will. So this is what we'll look at now. So let's look a little more closely at exactly what we mean by violence. I won't look at it from a point of view of physical violence. I think that doesn't need explanation. But I'll come at it from a maybe a bit of an unexpected angle. And I'll start talking about the ego. People often talk to me about the spiritual life as overcoming the ego. It's not always clear exactly what they mean by the term, but for the sake of this presentation, let's say the ego is the personal will. And this ego, this personal will, can force another ego, another personal will, to do what we want. We can force another to do what we want, whether they want to or not. And let's say that forcing another to do what we want, one ego dominating over another, is what we mean in essence by violence. We can see the connection between the two levels of practice of this precept. If you reflect that one's own life is that which is most dear to beings, and taking one's life is that which they want least of all. So killing is the most severe breach of this precept. It's the most severe, it's the thing that one ego can do to another that the other wants least of all. But violence is more than just that, of course. It can be physical or emotional. We can force somebody to do what we want through our position at work, or by having something which the other person wants or needs that we can exchange, like money, sex, knowledge, respect. Bhante Sangharachita coined the term power mode to describe acting with violence, to describe coercion, manipulation, exploitation. Power mode to describe one ego getting other egos to do what it wants, whether they want to or not. So this is power mode. So we can see the first precept as giving up acting in power mode. And of course it raises the question, if you want to stop acting in power mode, well, what can we do? It's always useful simply to be able to recognize the situation. This means noticing when we are, in fact, acting in power mode. And how to notice? Well, we can ask a simple question. Are we giving the other person a completely free choice? How does it feel to give somebody a free choice? We can get to know how it feels like, and it will be easier to do it more and more. Unless they have a completely free choice, there's an element of power. You might get worried. Would we still get what we want without power mode? It's worth bearing in mind that we all usually give more happily and more freely when we are free to give than what we would do if we were giving under duress. So there are secret benefits to be discovered through not using power mode. Of course, the world runs on power. The world runs on power mode. This is what Buddhism calls samsara. Probably all our relations include some element of power. Some of them may only be based in power. And maybe it would be hard to imagine relations completely free of power, seeing as how our ideologies, religions and states are based on them. We might also start to notice, as we get more sensitive, more and more how others act in power mode with us. This might be painful to recognize, but we always have a choice. It might be a hard choice to do what's wanted of us or not. The price may be ending the relationship. It might not always be the right thing to do, but we do have a choice, and that's important to remember. Mighty Sangharakshita taught us that acting in power mode was one of the characteristics of group members. There are many different groups. Some of them are very big, numbering. They're in their millions. Some groups are very small, just 2 or a few people. Maybe even some of the groups are emotionally positive. Others, of course, can be emotionally negative. A group could be emotionally positive and still operate in the power mode. But those who aspire not to act in the power mode, those who aspire not to allow others to have power over them, Bhante Sangharakshita called individuals, true individuals, or at least aspiring individuals, who have the ideal of becoming a true individual in their sights. And one quality, of course, of being a true individual is not using power mode and not acquiescing to others using power mode over them. He once said, "You can't emotionally manipulate a spiritually mature person. You can't emotionally manipulate a spiritually mature person." So let's see the relevance of being a true individual to the practice of the first precept a bit more. So first of all, the ideal of being a true individual means in essence one isn't a group member, positive or negative. Even if the true individual functions in groups from time to time, for practical purposes, in an early teaching, Bhante Sangharakshita gave a list of 5 qualities of the true individual. They're aware, emotionally positive, responsible, creative, and the 5th isn't so much a quality as a fact of their lives often. They're often unpopular. Socrates was put to death, for example. There were later expansions on this list of what is a true individual, but I think this is enough for now to give us a taste. And a true individual treats others as individuals, treats others as separate, isn't emotionally dependent on them, is emotionally independent. So using psychological terms, not codependent and not counterdependent. The true individual isn't dependent on others' approval or respect. He treats others freely, without coercion or manipulation. He treats others with respect, because he's free from prejudice and ideas that limit people. The true individual sees others as essentially the same as oneself, with all their complexities and depths, and pleasures and pains. They see their potential. The true individual sees others with greater awareness, than they see of themselves, perhaps. So, the opposite of acting in power mode is acting with love. We could say a true individual will tend to have genuine positive emotion. We could say that this is acting in the love mode. And this brings us neatly to the positive aspect of the first precept. So, coming to the positive aspect of this precept, with deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. With deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. So the first thing to notice is not just a precept about emotions or words or thoughts even, but it concerns the body, how we act. We need to express our positive emotions. And because the precept refers to the body as well as speech and mind, it refers to the person as a whole. This brings us to the question of purification. We purify the person as a whole, nothing left out. And we can purify the person as a whole by how we act, by what we say, and what we think, even by where we choose to put our attention. All of these things can come from skillful mental states or unskillful ones. Skillful mental states tend to make us feel happier, more open, allow us to bring more of our experience into awareness. And unskillful tend to do the opposite. This is what we mean when we talk about purifying our karma. Karma means intention. One aspect of karma is intention, volitional actions. And if we act out our intentions, they tend to get stronger. If we don't, they get weaker. So we can decide which intentions we want to encourage, which intentions we want to discourage. And ideally, we'll encourage the intentions coming from skillful states of mind and discourage those that come from unskillful states of mind. And bearing in mind as well that even though this precept talks about loving kindness, it's not just about kindness. Not to say that kindness isn't important, of course. But we have a similar question when we look at the Metta-bhavana meditation. It's often translated as the development of loving kindness. But in both cases, it's not just kindness that we're looking to develop. There are other positive emotions like sympathy, compassion, gratitude. Or we can simply act on the basis of a greater awareness of another. And feel the full range of our emotional responses to them. The first step might be to allow ourselves simply to feel certain things that we don't allow ourselves to feel. Maybe anger or sexual attraction. Not the last step, but the first. This precept also includes, as we've already seen, trying to be more of a true individual and treating others as individuals. It means not acting in the power mode, which itself can release deep, positive, strong emotion, acting in a love mode. But here we're talking not just about kindness as well, because there's a question of imaginative identification with another. A very eloquent expression of this perspective came from the great English romantic poet Shelley, when he said, "The great secret of morals is love, and putting yourself in the place of another and to many others, feeling their joys and sorrows." So this is what we are talking about when we talk about using our imagination, our imaginative identification And Bhante Sangharajta uses the following image for metta. Just as the sun gives heat and light, just as the sun enables life and growth in the material world, so metta gives heat and light. Metta enables spiritual life and spiritual growth in the spiritual world. So the first precept, the positive aspect, is much broader than simply kindness and acting with kindness. In fact, Bhante Sangharajta said this precept lies at the heart of all the other precepts, is at the essence of all other precepts. The other precepts are more detailed expressions. This first precept, more detailed expressions in different circumstances. So our spiritual path starts here. The first precept is the foundation of everything. So we'll do a guided meditation now to look at the practice of imaginatively identifying with somebody else and using that as a foundation for developing metta, that we can then go on to use as our foundation for how we act with this person. Our practice of the first precept. Using my bolster to keep my posture straight during meditation. So when you're ready, closing your eyes, taking a moment just to be here. Letting your awareness expand out into the room and beyond. And listening to all the sounds around you. And bringing your attention now to your body, seated here. Letting go of your muscles. Relax a little more deeply with each out-breath. And bringing your attention to all the different feelings and sensations in your body. bringing a warm, open attention, anything and everything that happens and beginning the practice, imaginative identification. To begin with, bringing to mind something that somebody says or does that annoys you, irritates you. Just allowing ourselves to imagine, to bring to mind this situation. And noticing what we think about them doing it. Are they doing it just to annoy us? Are they doing it to play the fool? But now, make the decision to put ourselves in their shoes, to put ourselves in their place. Imagine yourself, as vividly as you can, being that other person. What would it be like to really be them? And imagine yourself being that other person, doing or saying that thing that annoys you. Ask yourself, still imagining yourself vividly as that other person, how am I feeling when I do this? What am I doing? What am I thinking when I do this? And trying to let go of our own thoughts as much as possible and just be that other person. It might be a relief to stop having to justify how we are right, to let go of our own thoughts. And we can ask a deeper question. What's motivating? For what reason is that person doing what they're doing? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to achieve? Adding a new element to the visualization, bringing to mind the sun, the heat of the sun, the effect of the sun on us. Not at midday when the sun shines hottest, but at dusk, when we can feel the gentle warmth of the sun. Seeing the sun's golden light, and feeling its gentle warmth in our body. The the gentle warmth affecting our feelings. Letting the sun's heat glow in our bodies. And letting our bodies relax. And feeling the warmth of this pleasure, the pleasure of this warmth. And now putting yourself back in the shoes of the other person. Imagining the sun's heat and light glowing over them, the warmth and pleasure glowing inside them. Imagining being them as vividly as you can. And asking yourself, still in that place, how am I feeling when I do this thing? What am I thinking when I'm doing this thing? What's really motivating me to do this thing? All the time keeping yourself in the place of the other person. Now stop imaginatively identifying with the other person and coming back to yourself. Allowing yourself to remember how you saw the other person to begin with. allowing yourself to remember how you felt about them. As well as being aware of how you feel about them now. How you feel about them doing this thing or saying this thing that annoyed you. Has there been any change in your attitude? What has changed? And now, bringing your attention to your body as a whole once again. And bringing your attention into the room and beyond, listening to all the sounds around you. And when you're ready, slowly and gently opening your eyes to finish your practice. So, we've been looking at the first precept, the first great principle of ethics, meaning how we can act, how we can practice in our everyday lives, looking at it in a negative form, not taking life, but even not harming beings, avoiding coercion and manipulation, not allowing ourselves to be manipulated. We can think of it as simply ceasing to act in a power mode, and a connection with being a true individual, or at least an aspiring individual, and treating others as individuals, which can release strong positive emotion. We've been looking at other ways to practice the first precept, the positive aspect of this precept. With deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. But seeing that it's not just about kindness, looking at the different ways that we can do this, other positive emotions, imaginatively identifying with other people. To name too. How to practice in everyday life. Well, this is our theme for you in a week ahead. Of course, there's a daily practice of the Metta Bhavana meditation. And how to reduce manipulation and coercion. How to be more of an individual and treat others as individuals. How to act more on the basis of positive emotion and identify more with others. And specific questions that we can reflect on and share in our groups on Telegram or WhatsApp. What links have we experienced between ethics and meditation? Our conduct in everyday life and meditation? And what's our experience of our mental states underlying our actions, words, and thoughts? What do we mean when we talk about the ego? And how do we find acting without ego? Are we ever in a position to use power mode by virtue of resources that we have, our work or our money? What's our experience of giving other people an entirely free choice? How does it feel? Is it possible to give up power mode completely when acting in the world? What groups do we belong to? Who are we when we act outside a group? Does anybody manipulate you? Have you found ways to reduce it? Remembering the qualities of a true individual. Which are strongest in you? Which do you feel closest to? Which are weakest? Most distant? And how did you find a guided meditation? Imaginatively identifying with somebody else in a difficult situation. So yes, I hope you're something to be getting on with to stimulate your practice in the week ahead on the theme of the first great principle of ethics, the first precept, abstaining from harming beings and acting with deeds of loving kindness.